Hello, welcome to the Medical Associate Investment channel. So today we are going to continue with uh, another system. So today specifically we are going to concentrate on the respiratory system. So number one thing which we're going to start with are the terminologies. So in respiration there is a terminology which we call the ventilation, which is movement of air into and out of the lungs. Then we have external respiration, which is gaseous exchange between air, air in lungs and blood. That is external respiration. Then the transport of oxygen and carbon dioxide in the blood is after it goes to after transport oxygen and carbon dioxide in the blood. Then that's one which we are referring to as external respiration. So we have another one which is internal respiration. So internal respiration is the gaseous exchange between the blood and between blood and the tissues. Okay, then you have cellular respiration, which is the use of oxygen to produce ATP via glycolysis and TCA cycle and ETS. Okay, that is cellular respiration. Okay. Then some of the respiratory functions of this functions of the respiratory system. Number one would be the same thing we've talked about, is gaseous exchange, where oxygen enters blood and carbon dioxide leaves. Okay. And the other one would be regulation of blood pH. Okay. So this is altered by changing blood carbon dioxide levels, carbonic acid buffer system, and there is also sound production. Okay, so movement of air past vocal folds makes sound and speech. That's one of the other functions of respiratory system. Then the other function would be olfaction. So smell occurs when airborne molecules drawn into the nasal cavity. So that's one of the other functions, which is olfaction. Okay. And the other function is uh, thermoregulation. So heating and cooling the body is also one of the respiratory functions. And the other function is protection, which is of course against microorganisms by preventing entry and removing by preventing entry of microorganisms as well as removing them. Okay, so those are some of the functions under respiratory. Okay. So in terms of division, the respiratory system is divided into two: of the upper respiratory tract and the lower respiratory tract. So in between the pharynx and the larynx, that's where the upper respiratory tract divides into. Okay. So the upper respiratory tract is composed of the nose, pharynx, and associated structures. Okay. Then the lower respiratory tract starts from the larynx, trachea, bronchi, and as well as the lungs. That's the lower respiratory tract. Okay. That's the structure. And then the nasal cavity and the larynx. So these are the structures which are found in the nasal cavity and as well as the larynx. So the nasal cavity has the nares, the vestibule, inferior coca, medial coca, and the super and the superior coca. Okay, so this is how they are formed. Then when you go, you're going to find the opening of the auditory tube or the eustachian tube. Okay, then as you go down, then finally you're going to find the uvula near here. Okay, then again as you go down, you're going to find the pharynx. Okay, so the pharynx, you have the nasal pharynx, then you have the oral pharynx, then now we can even go to where the laryngopharynx is. Okay, then you have the epiglottis here. Then after you go through the epiglottis, you're going to find the so epiglottis is part of the larynx. So it's one of the first parts, the epiglottis vestibular fold. Then you have the thyroid cartilage, the vocal cords, and the cricothyroid cartilage, and finally the trachea. Then opposite it is the esophagus. some of the structures that surround the nasal cavity and the pharynx. So in terms of the nose, the external nose, the nasal cavity, and some of the functions of the nasal cavity is for passage of air, and also cleans the air, humidifies, warms air, smell. Then along the paranasal sinuses, there are resonating chambers for speech. Okay, that's the functions. So after that, you also need to go to the next thing, which is the next thing we are going to be talking about. Okay, so we're going to talk about the larynx. So the larynx has functions, of course, such as to maintain an open passage for air movement. Then you have the epiglottis and the vestibular folds, which prevent swallowed material from moving into the larynx. Then the vocal cords are primary resource of sound production. So this is the larynx. That is what we're talking about. Okay. And then the epiglottis are part of the larynx as well, and the vestibular folds as well. Okay. And these are some of the functions. So this is how the vocal cords are. So the vocal cords, we have the anterior part and the anterior view and the posterior view. Okay. Then the vocal cords are actually here. So on the vocal cords, we have the true vocal cords, which are here and the near the anterior part. Okay, and this is how actually they look like. This is the epiglottis, and that's the trachea. Okay, that is the vocal cord. Okay, then posteriorly you have the thyroid cartilage, thyroid, and the vocal cords within inside, and then you have the arytenoid cartilage here. Okay, let's move. Then you have the trachea. Okay, so trachea is one of the structures we need to talk about, and this in layman language is known as the windpipe, and it actually divides to form one will be the primary bronchi. You have the carinae, which is the cough, which makes up the cough reflex, okay, or which does the coughing part, the cough to make a cough reflex. Okay, then you have the tracheobronchial tree. So this one, definitely you need to even know how to draw the tracheobronchial tree, and as well as including the lungs. You definitely need to know how to draw. So the tracheobronchial tree is a non-acinus. It is comprised of the conducting zone. So these are some of the structures that are found within the trachea. Number one will be the conducting zone. Number two, you have the non-acinus. Okay. Then you have the trachea to the terminal, which is found between the trachea to the terminal bronchioles, which is situated for removal of debris, mucus, and as well as the mucus lined. Okay, and the conducting zone is passage for air movement controlled by smooth muscle at the end of the terminal bronchioles. Okay, then the cartilage holds tube system open, and smooth muscle will control the tube diameter. Then you have the acinus portion, which is the respiratory zone. So this is the this is found between the respiratory bronchioles to the alveoli. Then it is the site of gaseous exchange, and the area it's the site for gaseous exchange area, and the size of the area is that of a football field. Okay, then this is the thing I was talking about. You have to know how to draw the tracheobronchial tree. So this is how it looks like. Definitely need to know how to draw. So for the larynx here, the trachea here. Okay, then you have to move the trachea where they bifurcate, into primary bronchi. Okay, where it go to the right, left, then that's the carinae. Okay, then as they go to the carinae, as they bifurcate from the carinae, they're going to make the primary bronchi, secondary bronchi, tertiary bronchus, and finally into bronchioles. So it's the same in the opposite direction. Okay, then you have the covering, which you have the visceral organ which covers the lungs, which is known as the visceral pleura. Then in between the visceral pleura, we have the palatal pleura. Okay, then in between you have the pleural cavity. So meaning the palatal pleura covers the organs themselves, and the visceral pleura covers the organs themselves, whilst the palatal pleura is outside. Okay, it's one which shields the lungs, and it attaches to the wall of the thoracic cavity. That's the palatal pleura, but the visceral pleura will attach themselves to the lungs. Okay, then in between the palatal and the visceral pleura, you have the pleural cavity. Okay, hope you have made sense what I've said. Okay, and I've tried to simplify it. Then, of course, below them we have the diaphragm, which is the muscle, which we also need to talk about. Okay, so I think let's move on. Okay, so this is the bronchioles and the alveoli. So from the bronchiole, and this is once the bronchiole makes a terminal bronchiole, you have the respiratory bronchioles from this side, you have the alveolar ducts, and finally you are going to find the alveoli and the alveolar sac. Okay, then inside the alveolar sacs, this is where the gas section is going to, of course, take place from. Okay, that's the alveoli. Okay, then the alveolus and the respiratory membrane. So, of course, one of the things that are found within the alveolus, and we have the respiratory membrane, and the respiratory membrane is made up of the alveolar fluid, which of course has surfactant alveolar epithelium. You have the basement membrane of the alveolar epithelium of the interstitial space. You have basement membrane of the capillary endothelium. You have the capillary endothelium. You have the diffusion of oxygen, diffusion of carbon dioxide, and the red blood cell would be just near or below the capillaries as it is trying to get the oxygen after it has diffused into it. Okay, that's what we are talking about. Okay, then here on the first part, you are going to find that within the alveolar, you are going to find that there will be an alveolar epithelium or wall, which is made up of the type 2 pneumocyte, which has the surfactant secreting cells, and you have the type 2 pneumocytes as well. These are what makes up the alveolar epithelium. Then you have the capillary epithelium, which is the capillary epithelium wall. Then, of course, below it, we're going to find the red blood cell. Okay, then you have the macrophage and the airspace within the alveoli. Okay, then this segment that we started with is one which was more like a cross section of whatever we discussed in the respiratory membrane. Okay, so let's move to the lungs. Okay, so lungs, depending on whether it's the left one or the right one, they have different lobes. Okay, so that's how lungs are. So if we're talking about the right lung, so the right lung, since there is actually the liver there, so this one we're going to find that it has the mid lobe, the superior lobe, and the inferior lobe. Whilst the left lung has the inferior lobe and the posterior lobe. So in short, we are saying the right lung has 3 lobes, whilst the left lung has 2 lobes. Okay. So then 2 lungs are the principal organs for respiration. The right lung already we have said it has 3 lobes. Why? Because actually the liver is just where the liver is found, and the lung actually sits on the liver, making another lobe. Okay. Whilst the left lung, since there's no liver that side, so it has the 2 lobes. Okay. In terms of divisions, we have lobes, then you have the bronchopulmonary segments and the lobules. That's how they are divisions inside the lungs. Okay. We have the thoracic wall, muscles for respiration. Also, muscles of respiration, you have the sternocleidomastoids, scalens, pectoralis minor, external intercostal muscles, and the diaphragm. These are muscles of respiration. The muscles of expiration, we have the internal intercostals and of the abdominal muscles. These are muscles of internal respiration. Okay, these are muscles of respiration. Then we have the thoracic volume. We have the vertebra here, of course, we have the sternum. So, and as the lateral increase in volume increases, then also you are increasing the volume. Then the anterior, someone is having an for the anterior increase in volume, then of course you're also increasing the volume. Then you have the pleura. Okay, the pleura, you have the pleural fluid, which is produced by the pleural membranes. Okay, so the pleural fluid acts as the lubricant, and there is a normal range of pleural fluid should be somewhere 10 to 20 mils. Okay, and it also helps hold parietal and visceral pleural membranes together. Okay, that's the pleural. Okay, so as you are doing that, you are exhaling and inhaling. Then you have the alveolar pressure changes as you are doing the exhalation and the inhalation. Okay, those are the changes. Okay, and how do the alveolar volume also change? Okay, so of course the lung actually can recoil, which causes alveolar to collapse, resulting from the elastic recoil and surface tension. So for instance, maybe in pneumothorax, okay, where there is increased accumulation of air within the thoracic cavity. Okay, so it can disturb it can cause the elastic recoil to actually expand to a lot of to a large extent. So then you have the surfactant, which also reduces the tendency of lungs to collapse. Okay, then you have the pleural pressure, which is the negative pressure that can cause alveolar to expand. Then you have the pneumothorax, which is an opening between the pleural cavity and air that causes a loss of pressure. Okay, then what is the normal breathing cycle? The normal breathing cycle, of course, you have the pleural pressure, which is in centimeters of water. When someone inspires, that's how the pressure goes and it reaches somewhere here. Okay, then as you are exhalation, as you are expiring, the air which is during expiration, again the pressure goes back to the way it was. Okay, so from the negative pressure, then as you are inspiring, then it starts going back as if it's going to becoming more negative. Okay, then as you are expiring again, it's also going back to the way it was. That is the pleural pressure in centimeters of water. Okay, that's what we are talking about. Then the alveolar pressure for changes in water, I find that if it is zero, then during inhalation, then the alveolar pressure would be going to the negatives. Then as well expiration, then it will be going to the positives. Okay, then the changes in volume, you find that as well inhaling, of course, the change in volume is going to go up. Okay, so in short, when inhaling, the volume, the lung volume goes up. Then as well expiration, as well expiring, then the lung volume goes down. Then there is what we call lung compliance. Okay, or compliance, which is lung compliance. So this is a measure of the ease within each lung and the thoracic. This is a measure of the ease with which lungs and the thoracic expand. So the measure of the easiness with which lungs and thoracic expand. That is the lung, we call it lung compliance. Okay, so the greater the compliance, the easier it is for a change in pressure to cause expansion. Then you have a lower than normal compliance, means that the lungs and the thoracic are harder to expand. And of course, we have conditions that decrease lung compliance. We have pulmonary fibrosis, pulmonary edema, and respiratory distress. Okay, then you have pulmonary volumes, which are of course are a lot. So pulmonary volume number one, we call it tidal or tidal volume. Okay, so tidal volume is the volume of air inspired or expired during a normal inspiration or expiration. Then you have the inspiration volume, which is the inspiration reserve volume IRV, okay, which is the amount of air inspired forcefully after inspiration of normal tidal volume. Okay, then you have the expiration reserve volume, which is the ERV, which is the amount of air forcefully expired after expiration of normal tidal volume. You know, the residual volume, this one is the easiest to remember. This is the volume of air remaining inside the lungs, inside the respiratory passages and lungs after the most forceful expiration. So meaning the air that is going to remain within the lungs. Okay, after of course someone has expired, that is the residue volume. Okay. Then the pulmonary capacities. So we have inspiratory capacity, which is tied to volume plus the inspiratory reserve volume. Okay, so that is the inspiratory capacity. Then you have the functional residue capacity, which is the expiratory reserve volume plus the residue volume. That's the functional residue. That's the functional residue capacity. Then you have vital capacity, which is the sum of all. So meaning sum of the inspiratory reserve volume, tidal volume, and the expiratory reserve volume as well. Then you have total lung capacity now, which is now summation of the all, meaning even the ones which are not mentioned in the vital. Okay, so because vital could just concentrate on the inspiratory reserve volume, tidal volume, and the expiratory reserve volume. But total lung capacity is the summation of all, meaning the inspiratory and the expiratory reserve volumes plus the tidal volume and the residue volume as well. Okay, hope for the pulmonary capacities you have gotten some of the things under pulmonary. Okay, then we have tests such as the spirometry or the spirometer, which is able to change, which is able to detect the volume within the lung and as well as capacities within the lungs. Okay, so volume number one we talked about is the tidal volume. Okay, so tidal volume then is one of the volumes that we talked about. So, but to make these things easier, we usually start from the total lung capacity. So total lung capacity is a measure of everything. If you have seen, measure of the vital capacity and of course measure of the functional capacity and the functional residue capacity, and as well as measure of the residue volume, as well as the measure of the expiratory reserve volume, that is total lung capacity. Then vital capacity is just a measure of the residue volume, the expiratory reserve volume, and as well as the inspiratory capacity and the tidal volume, as well as the inspiratory reserve volume. That is the vital capacity. The inspiration capacity is a measure of the tidal volume and the inspiratory reserve capacity. So at least from the chart you'll be able to tell. Okay. Then let's talk about what we call minute ventilation. So meaning the total amount of air that actually moved into and out of the respiratory system per minute since they have added minute. So ventilation alone, we say this is just the amount of air moving in and out of the respiratory system. But if they put minute volume, then of course it is per minute. Then you have what we call the respiratory rate or frequency, which is the number of breaths taken per minute. Then you have what we call the anatomical dead space, which is a part of the respiratory system where gas exchange does not take place. Then you have the alveolar ventilation, where we have how much of air per minute enters the parts of the respiratory system in which gas exchange, of course, take. Okay, so there are some physical principles of gas exchange. So principle number one is the partial pressure, which is the pressure exerted by each type of gas in a mixture. Then of course they follow Dalton law, where of course the other thing would be water vapor pressure. Then the other thing the other physical property would be diffusion of gases through liquid. That is the other thing. Okay, so uh, those are some of the things we need to know. Okay, then we have concentration of diffusion of gas through the liquids. So there's concentration of a gas in a liquid, which is determined by its partial pressure and its solubility coefficients. Okay, then for Dalton's law states that the total pressure exerted by a mixture of gases is equal to the sum of the partial pressures of each individual gases. Okay, so we are saying the Dalton's law states that total pressure, so meaning you have P total, this is total pressure, will be equal to the uh, which is exerted by, of course, by a mixture of gases, is equal to the sum of the same partial pressures of each individual gas. So if you have three gases, okay, you want to say partial pressure of gas 1, partial pressure of gas 2, partial pressure of gas 3. If you add them together, then it will give you a total pressure exerted by the mixture of the same gases. That's how it is. Okay, then we have Henry's law. So Henry's law, of course, it states that the amount of a gas dissolved in a liquid is directly proportional to the partial pressures of the gas above the liquid. Okay, so we are saying the amount of a gas dissolved in a liquid is directly proportional to the partial pressure of the gas above the liquid. That is Henry's law. Okay, these are some core principles. Okay, then diffusion of gases through the respiratory membrane actually depends on the membrane's thickness, the diffusion coefficients of a gas, surface area of membranes, partial pressure of the gases in the alveoli, and as well as blood. Then the respiratory relationship between the ventilation and pulmonary capillary flow is that if there is an increased ventilation or increased pulmonary capillary blood flow, is going to increases the gas exchange. That's the relationship between the ventilation and pulmonary capillary flow. Then the physiological shunt is deoxygenated blood retaining from lungs. That's the physiological shunt, which is where the deoxygenated blood returns from the lungs. So that's the physiological shunt. Okay. Then let's go to the oxygen and carbon dioxide diffusion gradients. So for oxygen, it moves from the alveoli into the blood. Then blood is almost completely saturated with oxygen when it leaves the capillary. Then partial pressures of oxygen in blood decreases because of mixing with the deoxygenated blood. Then oxygen moves from tissue capillaries into the tissues, of course. Then for carbon dioxide, it moves from tissues into tissue capillaries and moves from pulmonary capillaries into the alveoli. That's how, okay. And these are some of the changes in partial pressures we are talking about. Okay, these are some of the things we are talking about when we inspire air and of course when we expire air. Okay, so then let's talk about hemoglobin and transport and oxygen transport. So oxygen is transported by hemoglobin, which is 98.5, and is also dissolved in plasma, which is the remaining 1.5 dissolved in plasma. Then oxygen hemoglobin dissociation curve shows that hemoglobin is almost completely saturated when partial pressures of oxygen is 80 millimeters of mercury or above. At lower partial pressures, the hemoglobin releases oxygen. And a shift of the curve to the left because of an increase in pH, a decrease in carbon dioxide, or a decrease in the temperature results in an increase in the ability of hemoglobin to hold the oxygen. So these are the things which can cause a shift in the curve to the left. Okay, because number one would be an increase in the pH. Two, we are saying decrease in carbon dioxide or decrease in the temperature, which results in an increase in the ability of hemoglobin to hold the oxygen. These are some of the things can make the curve, the dissociation curve to shape. Okay, so we are here. Okay, so that's about the dissociation. You have to know that the oxygen hemoglobin dissociation curve at rest, of course, is going to be like this. Then, as someone is, of course, inhaling oxygen, and it reaches somewhere 80 millimeters saturation, then that is the at least that will be the optimal. Okay, that will be the optimal oxygen, which is somewhere below, that's somewhere 75, but above 75, then that's the optimal oxygen. Okay, that's the optimal oxygen. Then, of course, in resting tissues, hemoglobin releases some oxygen, which is like partially emptying the glass. Then, if it is well saturated, the hemoglobin saturated with oxygen in the lungs is like a nearly full glass. That's how it is. Okay, that's how it is. Okay. Then, when someone is exercising, is having an exercise, of course, the exercising tissues, hemoglobin is going to release more oxygen, which is like emptying most of the glass. That's how it's going to be. Then, for hemoglobin saturated with oxygen in the lungs, is of course like the nearly full glass. So, but when someone begins to exercise, then of course there will be a lot of, then the glass would be, we start pouring the oxygen to the exercising tissues. So these are the shifting in the curves we are talking about. So how does so we have done transportation of carbon dioxide of oxygen. What about carbon dioxide? How is it transported? So carbon dioxide is transported as bicarbonate ions in 70%, in combination with blood proteins 23%, and in a solution of plasma. The hemoglobin that has released oxygen binds more readily to carbon dioxide than hemoglobin that has oxygen bound to it, which is the Howden effect. Then in the tissue capillaries, carbon dioxide combines with water inside red blood cells to form carbonic acids, which dissociates to form bicarbonate ions and hydrogen. Okay. Then in lung capillaries, bicarbonate ions and hydrogen ions move into the red blood cells and chloride ions move out. Then bicarbonate ions are going to combine with the hydrogen ions to form the carbonic acid solution and the carbonic equation. In the carbonic equation, of course, of carbonic reaction. And the carbonic acid is converted to carbon dioxide and water. And the carbon dioxide diffuses out of the red blood cells. Then increased plasma carbon dioxide lowers blood pH. Okay. Then the respiratory system regulates blood pH by regulating the plasma carbon dioxide level. So these things are very important, especially when just talking about some of the investigations such as the arterial blood gases. How do you take, okay, whether someone is having hypoxemia, hypercapnia, then, okay. So that's the respiratory system. Then, what about the respiratory areas in the brain? The brain has respiratory areas. Of course, number one, we have the specifically. Okay, let's start from when the muscles, of course, the diaphragm are involved in respiration, and the information is taken to the phrenic nerve, uh, nerve the diaphragm, and it goes to the medulla oblongata, or they can come from the internal intercostal spaces, then it can go um, to the dorsal respiratory group or the ventral respiratory group, and these are what makes up the medullary respiratory center. So meaning the medulla is one of the respiratory brain centers. Okay, the medullary respiratory centers. So and is one which receives and sends information to the muscles involved in respiration. Okay, apart from the medullary respiratory center, we also have the pontine or the pontine respiratory group, which is located here. Then we have what we call the rhythmic ventilation. So rhythmic ventilation, of course, when starting inspiration, So medullary respiratory centers neurons are continuously active. The centers receive stimuli from receptors and stimulation from parts of brain concerned with, voluntary respiratory movements and emotions. Then combine inputs from all sources of causes action potential to stimulate respiratory muscles. Okay, then you have started the respiration. Then increasing respiration, then of course more and more neurons are activated. Then for stopping respiration, neurons stimulating also are the one responsible for stopping respiration and receive input from the pointing group and stretch receptors in the lungs, and inhibitory neurons activated, and relaxation of respiratory muscles results in expiration. So that's from rhythmic ventilation starting, increasing, and stopping ventilation. Okay, then how do we modify ventilation? Of course, from the cerebral and the limbic system, respiration can be voluntarily controlled or modified by emotions. Okay, then sometimes we can also have chemical control where the carbon dioxide is a major regulator. So an increase or decrease in pH can stimulate chemosensitive areas, causing a greater rate and depth of respiration. If you have a lot of uh, increase or decrease in pH. Okay, so for oxygen levels in blood is going to affect the respiration when a 50% or greater decrease from a normal levels actually exists, because the oxygen respiration is going to be modified. Okay, so we want to modify respiration. Of course, there are centers in the brain, such as from the speech, emotions, voluntary control, breathing, and action potentials in major pathways are mostly the one which will uh, can lead to modification of respiration, and the input to the respiratory centers in the medulla and the pons is also modifies the respiration as well. Okay, these are some of the things we need to uh, understand. Okay, so for the medulla, the chemoreceptors detect any changes in pH, and so meaning the decrease in pH and an increase in carbon dioxide. Then the carotid and aortic body chemical receptors also detect a decrease in oxygen. Okay. Then the Ehring-Breyer reflex will detect the stretch receptors in the lungs. Then proprioceptors in muscles and joints also. Then the receptors for touch, temperature, and pain also inputs to respiratory centers in the medulla oblongata and pons to modify respiration. Okay, then the regulation of blood pH and gases. So if there is a decreased stimulation of the respiratory centers, going to result into decreased stimulation of the respiratory muscles by the respiratory centers, which is of course going to result in decreased ventilation, which decreases gas exchange. And a decrease in blood pH is caused by the increase in blood carbon dioxide, which of course leads to so the blood pH homeostasis is going to be maintained, and sometimes, most of the times, find that there is a there's going to be an increase in the blood pH, which is caused by the decrease in blood carbon dioxide. Then blood oxygen is also going to increase in the process. Okay, that's what you have to understand. Okay, so once again, this side the blood pH has been within normal range, and if the blood pH increases or decreases, then if blood pH was to decrease, if it was to increase, then there will be an increase in blood pH, which causes the decrease in blood carbon dioxide. This is detected by the medullary chemoreceptors. Then we are going to go back and reach here, where now blood pH has been maintained. But if blood pH decreases, then there will be a decrease in blood pH, of course, which is often caused by an increase in blood carbon dioxide detected by the medullary chemoreceptors. Then a decrease in blood carbon dioxide is detected by the carotid and aortic body chemoreceptors, which leads to increased stimulation of the respiratory centers, which results in increased stimulation of the respiratory muscles by the respiratory centers, which results in increased ventilation, which increases gas exchange. Then finally, there will be an increase in blood pH caused by the decrease in blood carbon dioxide, and blood oxygen is also going to increase. Then finally, the blood pH is going to be maintained. So this is how regulation of blood. So where we said in the ventilation exercise, we talked about to say ventilation increases abruptly at the onset of exercises, which leads to movement of limbs, which where if the movement of limbs, of course, has a strong influence, and this is a learned component. Okay, then ventilation increases gradually after immediate increase, and gradual increase occurs 4 to 6 minutes. Then there is an anaerobic threshold, which is the highest level of exercise without causing significant change in blood pH. But if exceeded, lactic acid is going to be produced by muscles. Okay, then effects of aging. So the vital capacity and maximum minute ventilation actually decreases as you age. Then rest volume and dead space also increases as you age. Then the ability to remove mucus from the respiratory passage also decreases. Then the gas exchange causes the respiratory membrane. The gas exchange across the respiratory membrane is also reduced as you age. Okay. Then that's the end of the tutorial video for today's lesson. And wherever you are not haven't understood, please leave a comment, and I will be sure to explain to you and reply. Okay, so thank you for watching. If you haven't subscribed, please subscribe and get your notification. See you in the next tutorial. Okay.